No top officials, as I had said in another video that I will mention in a few minutes, no top officials have demonstrably justified any rational, easily provable information on the reasons they have stated for any of the worldwide lockdown. Hello, I'm Raphael O'Neill from New Orleans, commonly known as Nola Butterfly on the internet. Today, I am again with ER, a person from Ontario, Canada.
Hello, Canadians. And have you ever seen Her Majesty or the Prime Minister or the Premier of Ontario or any other provincial premiers or any other and all health officials that have been in front of a camera show any sworn document of any electron microscans or chemical properties of any isolated and purified samples of the so-called virus and attach the name of someone real that can be verified? No, I don't think so. So in Canada, it is not being demonstrably justified. And what about the Solicitor General?
And hello, my fellow American brothers and sisters. Have you ever seen president or any state governor or health official that have been in front of the camera show any sworn document of any electron microscans or chemical properties of any isolated and purified samples of the so-called virus?
So if you're not a Canadian,
Or an American?
has anyone shown any sworn document of any electron microscans or chemical properties of any isolated and purified samples of the so-called virus in the part of the world you live in?
Likely not at all, because it would be obvious if it was shown.
There has never been purification, isolation, and definition of biochemical properties, nor any electron micrographs. Nothing has been demonstrably justified, and they therefore acted privately in the fear-mongering. They acted outside of statutory authority and are privately liable. They never brought documentation of proof and must not be allowed to bring any proof at this point because it could be fake.
But what we have seen are lies about the hospitals and test centers. Many videos are now taken down from YouTube and Facebook. And trying to talk about the extremely high-frequency communication systems being installed during the lockdown seems also to be taboo. The 60 gigahertz frequency affect oxygen bonds, but you can't talk about that on YouTube. Oxygen is related to the lungs as well as hemoglobin. If you affect that, there will be health issues, period. End of the story on that one.
So all officials who stopped respecting the fundamental laws of the land, who became mindless order followers, who also had a statutory duty to safeguard our fundamental rights and freedoms, all those who had the duty and who failed to safeguard our fundamental rights and freedoms. And the video we just referred to mentions the main people to safeguard our fundamental rights and freedoms. And this specific group or class of persons, and I am taking my time here, letting you know that they failed to statutorily uphold their duties. They withheld their services. They acted with misconduct, had poor moral habits and character for which they had a lawful duty to perform and uphold our fundamental rights and freedoms. So I'm not trying to keep you at the edge of your seat, but I really want to emphasize that this class or group of people, I need to single them out to emphasize how responsible they are for the damages of the lockdown. This group or class of persons acted outside of statutory authority, and as mentioned in the video titled, "Lockdown Not Demonstrably Justified, Police Failed to Safeguard Freedoms," that's the title, that because they acted outside of statutory authority, that they are privately liable, meaning you and I and others can hold them financially responsible for all the damages, which amounts in the billions, if not trillions of dollars, just North America alone.
This group or class of persons are so dangerous to our finances and our rights and freedoms, yet they are under the radar, yet so out in the open. Many of us are afraid of them, And if anyone is afraid of this group of people, it means that we must get rid of this group of people from our payroll right away. We will have to replace them with honest people. Before I state who this group or class of persons are, ER would like to read again a few particular statutes, and although what ER will be reading will be Canadian law, almost every country in the world has similar laws, and I encourage everyone to find the exact equivalent for your location and use it to hold these particular officials financially responsible for every dollar or damage and every ounce of fear, pain, and suffering due to fear-mongering that they did nothing about and upheld. So ER will now read the law, and you will quickly see who is privately liable and who we are to go to pay for every single damage caused, whether financial or damage from fear and stress and loss of enjoyment of life.
So this brings me to Section 1 of the Canadian Constitution Act 1982, Part 1, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which starts like this. Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and now Section 1 states, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified. There's that word, demonstrably justified, in a free and democratic society. And so now I read Section 2 of the Canadian Constitution Act, 1982, Section 2. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. A, freedom of conscience and religion. B, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. C, freedom of peaceful assembly. I'll say that one again, freedom of peaceful assembly. And D, freedom of association. We have lost the freedom of assembly, among other things, and we lost it without it being demonstrably justified as per Section 1 of the Canadian Constitution. Similarly, in your country. So let me quickly read Section 52 of the Canadian Constitution Act. Section 52 states, subsection 1, the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect. Okay, so I just read Fundamental Laws of the Land or Canada, and I urge you to try to find your own laws if you are outside of Canada. So now listen carefully to the next section of law I'm going to read. It's the Police Services Act of Ontario. And I'm sure it is similar pretty much everywhere else. And here we go. Declaration of Principles, Section 1 of the Police Services Act. Police services shall be provided throughout Ontario in accordance with the following principles. 1, the need to ensure the safety and security of all persons and property in Ontario. And 2, listen carefully, the importance of safeguarding the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. So the totality of responsibility lays on the police. Yes, the police. There's also another person, the Solicitor General. Again, in the Police Services Act, the Solicitor General Administration of Act, Section 3, subsection 2 of the Police Services Act. The Solicitor General shall, A, monitor police forces to ensure that adequate and effective police services are provided at the municipal and provincial levels. Did you get that? It's the police. The police failed to act under statutory authority. They failed to do their duty as they acted outside of statutory authority. They are privately liable, and I ask all people on earth to seek financial remedy from every police officer who failed to safeguard our fundamental laws of the land and who also ignored the section that discussed demonstrably justified, which is Section 1 of the Constitution Act of Canada.
Can you think of how the police failed to safeguard our fundamental freedoms? How they charged people ridiculously? Or even some police officers have been slamming a woman to the ground while the woman had a baby in her arms and the baby slammed to the ground as well? Or how about how they did not seek demonstrably justified reasons and then arrest those in power for not supplying it. It's the police that have enforced the lockdown, the ruining of incomes, the ruining of businesses, the ruining of honesty, and the failure to report the total lies about how hospitals and test centers are overrun. They are not overrun, except in very certain 5G hotspots, as per a new study proves. So again, it's the police who are privately liable for all damages. It's the police who are privately liable for all the fear-mongering and traumatization to children, adults of almost all ages, and especially making those in the golden years fear so extremely deep.
The police failed to safeguard the fundamental freedoms by not ensuring anything was demonstrably justified. The police are responsible for the long lines at the grocery stores. The police are responsible for closing places of worship. The police are privately liable for businesses shutting down and everything else that has gone downhill. It's the police. It's the police stations where the police are. That is where to go to get compensation from every police officer. They are privately liable. Go to them, ask them for damage compensation, ask them politely, and get them to answer you with how they are going to repay you for their actions or lack of actions. They failed big time and are privately liable. All we are doing is making a claim against them privately. Make sure every police officer is made to pay for the damages to you, your loved ones, business owners, and especially damages to those who lived in severe fear and severe stress.
Go to the police. You can find them at police stations of one form or another. Police officers also have homes. Find out where they live and seek financial damages at their homes as well. They are privately liable. Peacefully and non-violently. They are privately, legally liable.
Remember Ron Carelli versus Duplessis? Acting outside of statutory authority makes them privately liable. Police officers are privately liable. Hold them responsible for every single issue, including misconduct.
To hear more, you can watch our first video we did titled Lockdown Not Demonstrably Justified, Police Fail to Safeguard Freedoms, to hear the more detailed version of how we got to this conclusion. So now, this is an example of what to say to a police officer or anyone at the police station. Remember, they had the duty and failed and are privately legally liable. So here's what you can say.
So again, this is the Canadian version. So find the laws in the country where you live and do the same. So this is what you can do when you meet up with a police officer. Hello, sir, or Madam Police Officer. I'm holding you privately liable for the lockdown that was not demonstrably justified. And you committed misconduct and you failed to obey a statute. Many statutes, actually, namely the Police Services Act, Section 1, Subsection 2, that is to safeguard the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and Human Rights Code, specifically the Canadian Constitution Act 1982. You fail to uphold Sections 1 and 2 of the Constitution in the least. A Supreme Court decision of Ron Carelli versus Duplessis in 1959 stated that when acting outside of statutory authority, you are privately liable. Sir or ma'am, what is your name? What is your badge number? I make a claim upon you in the amount of, and pick whatever you need. If your family lost a $10 million business, then you would say, I make a claim upon you in the amount of $10 million for the loss of my business, and other claims that you can make for the loss of enjoyment of life and for financial damages that my family had to incur as a result of your failure to act to safeguard freedoms that you had a duty to safeguard. Will you now discuss with me payment? This is the cost of being an unlawful order follower. And also, I think you should be in jail.
And then pursue that police officer peacefully until they pay you the money legally, and never stop until you are paid. Involve others and help each other until payment in full is made. Then, if others are with you, they do the same to that police officer or to another police officer. They are privately liable. Make them pay legally. Go after others who also created the fear-mongering, like media outlets, and all others who interfered with your constitutional rights. Again, do all of this with a soft, kind voice. And if you are with others, ask others to stay totally silent so each one gets their turn seeking financial damages from police officers. Thank you. God bless and blessed be. I'm Raphael O'Neill from New Orleans, and I was present with ER from Ontario, Canada. Now let's create a joyous world together. Make this backfire on them. Go after them with soft voices, one after the other, endlessly.
Beautiful.